This is Kathy back. We're going to continue with Pilgrim stories. I hope you're enjoying it. I heard some of you love it and some of you, it's not your favorite thing, but let's just finish it out. Hang in there with me and we'll finish out hearing this part of the story of who really discovered North America, who came first, who came next, who came then to settle the land to get it ready for so many more people to come. So the Pilgrims, remember, they were leaving Holland, getting on the Speedwell and going back to England to be able to pick up some more of their friends and other people that wanted to leave England so they could sail across the Atlantic Ocean. All right, so the last page we wrote on was this one. And maybe you've been on the flipping in your history journal. Maybe you've been drawing a picture on the back of it. Today, after you listen to this first part that I'm reading, I'm going to have you write a couple of sentences on the back of this page before we get to the next page, which is this one. And then you can trace it, draw a line, circle where they're leaving from, circle where they're going to, and we'll write a little sentence on this one. So they have been, just to get up close to here, they have been over here in Holland, and they're getting ready to go back to England right here, and then they're going to sail across the ocean. All right, are you ready? So if you've got your history journal, flip to this page that you did, the last one, flip to the back of it, and get a pencil. You're going to write a couple of sentences in a little bit, but not right now. Let me read a little bit to you. All right. Farewell to Holland. And I've got a great picture to show you in just a second. Ugh. All right. Are you ready? When all was ready, they bade their Dutch friends goodbye. That means said goodbye to them. How kind these people had been to them during the years they had lived in Holland. They had done all they could to make the Pilgrims happy and comfortable in their city. And when they were preparing to go away, many yellow balls of cheese and little tubs of butter and webs of white linen came from these good Hollanders. So they gave them things to help them make the trip too, and some fabric, some material, some linen. John Robinson and all the members of his church went to Delfshaven with those who were to sail on the Speedwell. As the canal boats moved slowly away, the Pilgrims looked for the last time upon their little cottages. They had lived 12 long years in Holland, and it seemed like a dear home to them. Most of the children had never known any other home. Groups of Hollanders stood at their doors to wave farewell to the Pilgrims as they passed. 5 or 6 little boys with bare legs and clumsy wooden shoes ran along beside the canal boats, calling in Dutch to their friends. But now the boys had shouted a last goodbye. The city with its great mills and shops, its quaint houses and pretty gardens, lay behind them. They were coming to the beautiful city gate with its round towers and pointed spires. Mary Chilton and Faith and Patience Brewster stood together looking at the great gate. "Do you remember the first time we passed through this gate, Mary?" asked Patience. "That was 11 years ago, and you were a very little girl." "Yes, indeed, I remember it," answered Mary. "I was 6 years old. I can remember our home in England and the ship in which we came to Holland. Can you, Fear?" "I do not remember much about England," answered Fear, who was the youngest of the 3. "But I remember our home in Amsterdam. I wonder where Jan and Katrina are this summer. Their boat was in Leiden all winter." Those were the kids that lived on their boat, remember? And so the girls talked of anything except their long parting. They could not speak of that. The tears were so close to Fear's eyes, she was afraid to wink lest they run over. This was a beautiful summer day. Holland meadows had never looked brighter. There were gay little summer houses perched on stilts by the side of the lake. Some stood in the water, and a little boat tied to the steps of one showed how its owner had reached it. There he sat, smoking his long pipe and watching his little son, who sat on the doorstep and fished. Everywhere were the windmills, the dikes, and the canals that had seemed so strange to them at first. Now all these things seemed like old friends to the Pilgrims and made them sad to say goodbye to Holland. Late in the evening they reached Delfshaven, where the Speedwell was waiting for them. All night the sailors worked, loading the goods from the canal boats into the ship and making ready for an early start in the morning. Then came the hardest parting. The tears would start. Even strong men wept as they looked into each other's faces and thought that perhaps they might never see these friends again. There on the ocean shore, these brave men and women knelt down and prayed to the God they loved. They prayed that he would be with those who stayed, as well as with those who sailed away. Their pastor's voice broke many times as he spoke to God of his friends. After this prayer, the Pilgrims went silently and sadly on board the Speedwell and sailed away to England. They waved to the dear ones on the shore and stood watching them as long as they could see them. That is hard, to leave people and even leave some of your family members because they couldn't go yet. That's really hard. Can you think of something you'd want to say, maybe dictate to your mom a sentence and she could write it down for you, or you could write a sentence? Can you write a couple of sentences to tell why it was so difficult for the Pilgrims to say farewell to their Dutch friends and to leave some of their family members behind? What could we say about that? Could we say, it was very hard for the Pilgrims to leave their friends because they loved them and cared for them? Or you could say, it was hard for the Pilgrims to leave because the Dutch people had been so kind and good to them. Could you add something like, they didn't want to leave their family because they were afraid they might never see them again. There was that chance. Even though they prayed and asked God to keep them safe, they would probably keep praying every day and every night because they just didn't know. So you can pause this video and write that sentence on the back of your, the last one we wrote on. Write a couple of sentences and then start the video again. And I'm going to keep reading. Let's find out what happens to the Pilgrims as they ride on the Speedwell from Holland to England. Here's a picture. Right here. That's a picture of the Speedwell. You could even draw a picture of the Speedwell if you want. I know Ezra would love to do that. Probably David too. Maybe even Mabel and Jessa. And then they're leaving Holland, or maybe that's showing them arriving in England. I don't know. We'll have to read a little bit to see. You can always pause the video to take a look at the picture. Okay, let's keep going. The Speedwell. 4 days of good wind and fair weather brought the Speedwell straight to England. There the Pilgrims found about 40 friends who wished to go with them to America. They had hired a little ship called the Mayflower, which now lay in the harbor. That may have been the Mayflower. Let's see. I don't know. Nope, that was the Speedwell. Still, sorry, that picture. They had hired a little ship called the Mayflower, which now lay in the harbor ready to sail. It, too, was loaded with provisions for the long journey and the cold winter. The Speedwell was a smaller vessel than the Mayflower, so some of the Pilgrims from Holland joined their friends on the larger boat. Then the two ships sailed out of the harbor into the blue sea. Oh, I forgot. Both ships, that was the Mayflower and the Speedwell, they were leaving England. Both ships left to go. The Pilgrims watched the shores of their native land grow faint and fainter. Does that mean the land fainted? Like collapsed because they couldn't stand up anymore? No, it means it grew dim. It grew smaller as they went away. As I'm going away, I look smaller. Ooh, my head looks small and my body looks big. But if I move something away, far away, it looks small. If you see something far in the distance, it gets smaller. It's called perspective. Would they ever see dear old England again? Surely none of them expected to see it so soon as they did. They were hardly out of sight of land when the speedwell began to leak. They could see no hole, but slowly the water rose in the bottom of the boat. It crept around the boxes and barrels stored there. The hole must be behind this pile of boxes, said the captain. While some of the men pumped the water out of the ship, others quickly moved the great boxes away. Yes, there was a little stream of water running down from a hole in the side of the ship. This was soon mended, but still the water slowly rose in the boat. The men at the pumps worked harder than ever, but the water came in as fast as they could pump it out. More holes were found and mended, but still the ship leaked. There was nothing to do but go back to land as soon as possible. Those on the Mayflower did not wish to go on without their friends, so both ships turned around and returned to England. When the Speedwell reached shore, the shipbuilders came to look at it. It carries too heavy a mast for so small a ship, said one. The hull is worn out, said another. See, it needs new boards, fresh tar, and fresh paint. It will take weeks to repair the ship and make it safe for a long voyage. What could the Pilgrims do? The fine weather was passing. They would hardly reach America now before the heavy storms of winter came. It was quite plain they could not wait until the Speedwell was repaired. The Mayflower could not hold all who wished to go to America. Yet the Pilgrims could not hire another ship. They had to pay money to ride on these ships, to hire a captain and sailors, because they weren't sailors. They didn't know how to hoist the mast and deal with a ship, do the rigging, especially if there were a storm. They didn't know. They were farmers. And then some of them learned how to work in mills. So they were not sailors. The passengers on the Speedwell were a long way from home. It seemed hard for them to return to Holland. Some of those who lived in England offered to give up their places on the Mayflower and return to their homes. Next summer, there will be other ships sailing to America from England, and it may be a long time before another will go from Holland, they said. So the people that they were picking up in England said, we won't go. All right, here we go. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions and see if you can fill in the blank. Ready? After blank days, the Pilgrims came to England on the Speedwell. How long did it take them to go from Holland to England? How many days? 4 days, that's right. About blank friends wanted to go to America too. How many people did they pick up in England? You remember? About how many? It was kind of a lot. Wasn't it about 40 friends? I'm trying to see. Just to make sure. We always look back at our text. 40 friends, that's right. They had hired a little ship called the blank. Actually, it was bigger than the Speedwell. What ship did they hire to take them to America? It's the most famous name. We probably all know it. It's called the Mayflower. That's right. Both ships came back to England because the Speedwell began to, what? Leak water. The Pilgrims wanted to hurry and leave before the blank storms came. Before the winter storms came. Because everyone could not fit on the Mayflower, some would try to go next, what season? next summer. That's right, when the weather was better. All right, we're going to start the story of the voyage of the Mayflower. I wonder if I should... I'm going to keep going. I was going to say, I wonder if I should stop this. Take a look. Here's the picture. You can always pause the video if you need to. Here's the picture of the Mayflower setting sail. This is at the beginning of this little chapter. Okay. The voyage of the Mayflower. When the provisions and the boxes of other goods had been moved from the Speedwell to the larger boat, the Mayflower, it started at once more. Now she carried 100 passengers besides her sailors, or in addition to her sailors. We should think the Mayflower a very small boat in which to cross the ocean. The cabin was badly crowded, and there was only one small deck. That's the top part that people can get out from the bottom and get out on top of. We know, we've read about Leif Erikson, Columbus, we even read about Crusoe, where they were all sailing on these kinds of ships. At that time, no one had thought of making a boat go by steam. The Mayflower had large white sails, and when the wind was good, she sped over the water like a great seabird. But sometimes there was no wind at all, and the little vessel lay still upon the quiet water. Sometimes the sky grew black with storm clouds, and the fierce winds swept down upon the ship. Then the sailors quickly bound the sails close to the masts, but still the vessel was often driven far out of her course. No wonder it took so long to cross the ocean in those days. They didn't have control over the weather. In one of these great storms, a young man almost lost his life. For many days, the passengers had been kept in the cabin by the weather. The deck was wet and slippery. The rough winds swept across it. The waves washed over it. It was not safe for any of the passengers up there on the deck. But John Howland did not like to stay quietly in the crowded cabin, so he climbed the narrow stairs and stepped out on the slippery deck. How wild and terrible the storm was. The waves were almost as high as the masts. Oh my goodness. Let's look at that picture again. Can you imagine if the waves got all the way as high up as the masts? Now, they had made all the sails wrap tightly around the mast so they weren't spread out like that, but whoa, this boat was rocking, going up and down and up and down the waves. I don't know if you've ever been on a boat out in the ocean. I have. And I threw up. It was rough because it was kind of a small boat out in the mouth of the Columbia River. It was actually a fishing boat, and oh my goodness, it made me feel sick. But after I threw up, I felt better. You kind of get used to it, but it's tough. I bet these people got sick. And when people get sick inside of a boat, it's gross. They were struggling. I bet they were praying a lot. Let's see. At other times, it was quite hidden between them. No, sometimes the Mayflower... here we go. How terrible the storm was. The waves were almost as high as the masts. Sometimes the Mayflower rode high on the tops of the waves. But other times, it was quite hidden between waves. John saw a great wave about to break over the ship. He tried to reach the cabin door, but he was too late. With a crash like thunder, the wave struck the ship and swept away one of the masts. John seized the railing with both hands, but the wave was stronger than he was. It flung him into the sea. "Help! Oh, help!" he cried. "Help!" But his voice could not be heard above the storm. He fought with the waves and tried to swim, but it was no use. The water closed over his head. Who could help him now? Only God. Over the side of the ship hung some ropes dragged down by the falling mast. John saw one of these long ropes trailing through the water. The rope was close at hand. He reached out and he grasped it. Hand over hand, he pulled himself toward the ship. His strength was going. His strength was going away. He could hardly hang on any longer. No one would come to his rescue. Some sailors on the Mayflower saw John struggling for his life. "Hold on, John," they shouted as they pulled in the rope. John did hold on, though his hands were stiff with cold and the waves beat him back from the ship. Slowly he was lifted from the water, and strong arms reached down to help him. At last he lay upon the deck, faint but safe. Whew. That's scary. Should he have gone out on that deck? Probably not. It was a miracle God saved his life, and the sailors saw him. All right. We've got just a couple more pages, and then we're going to stop for this one. Water babies. On and on the ship sailed. How wide the water seemed. Some days were full of sunshine. Then the little children could play upon the deck. They loved to watch the sunset across the wide ocean. Then the sky was bright with purple and gold. Each wave caught the colors from the clouds until the whole world seemed aglow. They loved to watch the stars come out in the evening. At first, only 2 or 3 of the biggest, bravest ones peeped forth to see if the sun had gone. Then a few others looked timidly out. Yes, the sun was really gone, and his glory of red and gold was quickly following him. Then troops of little stars burst from their hiding places. They twinkled merrily at the little pilgrims as if to say, "See, we are going with you to your new home. We went with you to Holland, and we will go with you to America. Do not be lonely." But it grew colder, for the winter was drawing near. Many days the deck was too cold and icy to play upon. Then the children must stay in the dark, crowded cabin. Poor little pilgrims. Many were ill, and all wished the long voyage was over. There were but few games they could play inside the little cabin, and they had no toys or storybooks. How they longed for the green fields and shady woods of not only their home, but even of Holland. Then Priscilla told them stories of the sunny land where she once lived. Did only pleasant things happen in that wonderful country? If there were any unhappy times there, Priscilla never spoke of them. The stories she told were such merry tales they brought sunshine into the gloomiest little faces. Even tired mothers who were too far away to hear the story would smile as they looked into Priscilla's laughing eyes. "What a comfort that child is," they often said. Then Mary Children, who was a grown-up girl now, played games with them. John Alden whittled out a wonderful puzzle for them, and everyone tried to make the voyage pleasant. But 9 weeks is a long time to be shut up on a boat and to be tossed about by the rough waves. The little ones were so tired it seemed to them they could not stand it any longer. Then what do you think happened out there on the ocean? 2 dear little baby boys were born. Oh, how happy the children were. They forgot to be tired then. Those babies never lacked nurses. In other words, someone to hold them. And this chapter is called Water Babies. Here's a picture. I cannot imagine being a mama having to have a baby in a ship tossing and everybody crowded around. Ugh. You may be sure those babies never lacked nurses. It was such fun to hold them and sing to them softly until they closed their eyes and went to sleep. Of course, everyone wanted to help name the babies. Each thought of the very best name he knew, but it was hard to suit all. Giles Hopkins wished to name his baby brother Jan after a friend in Holland, but that name did not suit his parents at all. They did not want to give their baby a Dutch name. Mistress Hopkins thought he should be named Stephen for his father. "No," said Master Hopkins. "If he were given my name, he would be called Little Stephen until he grew to be a man. I believe no child was ever born here before. I wish he might have a name no other has ever had." What could it be? Some spoke of Mayflower, but others thought that a better name for a little girl. A week passed and still the baby was not named. "This will never do," said his mother. "Constance, you have not said a word. What would you like to name your little brother?" Constance said she had been thinking Ocean would be a good name for this baby. Ocean, Ocean, whispered the mother to herself. Actually, Ocean, Ocean. It was certainly a very suitable name, but it had a queer sound. Surely no other child had ever born or carried that name before. When Elder Brewster heard about the new name, he said, I know of a word in another language which means ocean. It is Oceanus. Perhaps you would like that name better. Oceanus. That seems like an odd name for a child, but the Pilgrims often gave their children names which would seem strange to us. This did not sound so strange to them. They thought Oceanus Hopkins a very good name for the baby, and so it was decided. Then came the other wee baby. He too must have a suitable name. What should it be? After many names had been considered, Mary Allerton said she thought Wandering would be a good name for the baby because the Pilgrims were wandering in search of a home. Mistress White did not quite like Wandering for a name, but she asked Elder Brewster if he did not know another word which meant the same thing. And so this baby was named Peregrine. Peregrine White and Oceanus Hopkins. Those were very large names for such very tiny babies, thought Love Brewster. Wow. What a crazy story. Okay, that's all for today. I'll see you later.